Hey everybody, so it's Sunday, which means it's time to do Games of the Week, and we are down to the last week in the regular season of the NHL. This is it for the regular season. This is it for NHL Games of the Week for this season, because every game in the playoffs is a Game of the Week. So this will be the last NHL Game of the Week video until next season, 2019-2020. So we are down to the final few days here, and the playoff races are still white hot right now. And that's basically going to be the theme of this episode of Games of the Week, because I'm going to focus mostly on the bubble teams in both the East and the West, and it could come down to the last day of the season, given what the standings look like right now. So let's start with today, Sunday the 31st. We have Minnesota versus Arizona playing tonight. Absolutely massive game. Colorado currently holds the last wild card spot. The two teams chasing Colorado, Minnesota and Arizona. They play tonight in a huge, huge game. We also have Carolina versus Pittsburgh tonight. This is a big game for Carolina, because if they win tonight over Pittsburgh, I think that pretty much... I don't think it would mathematically lock them in, but it pretty much locks them in. So this is a big game for the Hurricanes tonight. Columbus versus Buffalo. Any game involving Columbus or Montreal is a game of the week this week. They are, right next to each other in the standings. It is so close. One of these teams is going to miss. One of these teams is going to make it. And Montreal beat Winnipeg last night in a game that I did not expect them to win. And Columbus beat Nashville last night in a game that I did not expect them to win. So I believe they're still tied in points now. Columbus still has the game in hand. But you're going to see a lot of Columbus and a lot of Montreal in this video. But Columbus plays Buffalo tonight in a game that they really, really need to win. And then not playoff race, but still a game of the week. Calgary versus San Jose, the top two teams in the Pacific Division. Potential second-round playoff matchup if that's the way the playoffs go. There's certainly no guarantee of that. But two very, very good teams, and it should be a great game. Moving on to tomorrow, April 1st, we have Toronto versus the New York Islanders. That's just two really good teams in the East. Toronto, even though they're a 3 seed, they're, still one of the top teams in the Eastern Conference. They just lost to Ottawa, in an embarrassing loss for them last night against the worst team in the league. So look for Toronto to really come out with some fire and really, bring it against the Islanders. And then the Islanders, they're playing good hockey again, and they're trying to get to the top spot in the Metropolitan Division. They're a little bit behind Washington. They are really trying to take that first place spot. So that should be a really good game. And then Colorado versus St. Louis. Again, Colorado currently holds the second wild card spot in the Western Conference. Huge game for them against a division rival in the Blues. The Blues are already locked in. They're pretty much guaranteed to finish third. But they are locked into a playoff spot. But they can't just take the rest of the season off, because Dallas, I believe, mathematically can still catch them. So that should be a good game between rival teams. Then we get to Tuesday, April 2nd, and this is a huge day in the NHL. This might be the most important day of the season as far as the NHL is concerned, as far as the bubble teams especially are concerned. This could really shake things up. You have Boston versus Columbus. Obviously, they're on here because of Columbus. That's a huge game for them. You have Tampa Bay versus Montreal. Obviously, Columbus and Montreal are the two teams going at it. They play the top two teams in the East, in Tampa Bay and Boston. So, real tough games for both Eastern Conference bubble teams that night. If one of those teams can win and the other loses, that's going to be a real shakeup, or not necessarily a shakeup, but it's really going to have an effect on the standings and who gets in and who doesn't. Then out west, Minnesota plays Winnipeg, and I think by this point, by Tuesday, Minnesota could potentially, seeing how how today goes, Minnesota could potentially be in a situation where that's a must-win game against Winnipeg, or if they lose that, they could be out. So that could be a massive game. Colorado plays Edmonton. So again, the Avalanche have they have a tough game against St. Louis on Monday, but then they come back on Tuesday and play Edmonton, and that's a game that they definitely should win. And if they win and Minnesota loses, now you're looking at Minnesota being pretty much out and Colorado having a stranglehold on that last playoff spot. And then Arizona, the other team involved in the race out west, plays the LA Kings in a game that they should win. So Minnesota has the toughest opponent that night for sure, and then Colorado and Arizona have games that they both should win. So that could really kind of settle things out west potentially, given where Colorado's at and where Arizona and Minnesota are at. It certainly could knock Minnesota out. Nothing on Wednesday the 3rd, so we move to Thursday the 4th. A big night on Thursday the 4th as well. We have Tampa Bay versus Toronto, two Atlantic Division teams there that are really good. Montreal versus Washington, we've talked about this multiple times now. Montreal's schedule the rest of the way is brutal. Brootal, brutal, spelled wrong, the meme way. But Montreal's schedule is absolutely brutal to end the season. They play Washington on Thursday. Minnesota has to play Boston. Real tough game for the Wild there. Colorado plays Winnipeg. Very, very difficult game there for the Avalanche. So that's why I think if you're Colorado, you want to get this, you want to give yourself a pretty good cushion with these games against St. Louis and Edmonton, because then you play Winnipeg, and that's not going to be easy. So big game there. And then Arizona has to play Vegas, a very difficult opponent for the Coyotes. So all three of those teams in the race out in the Western Conference have very difficult games on Thursday. So again, that could be a big night. Moving on to Friday the 5th, we have Columbus plays the New York Rangers. That's a game that they should win for sure. And they could, depending on how Montreal does against these tough opponents, playing Tampa Bay, playing Washington, if Montreal loses both of those games and Columbus wins along the way here, Columbus could potentially lock up the playoff spot with a win over the Rangers on Friday. So that could be a massive game for the Blue Jackets. And then we finally get to the last day of the season, and I couldn't fit them all on the board. But we have Tampa Bay versus Boston, which isn't a playoff race. That's just two of the two best teams points-wise in the Eastern Conference. Just that incredible matchup and potential later round playoff matchup. Then we have Toronto versus Montreal in a game that could be absolutely crucial for for Montreal in making the playoffs if they're not already eliminated up to that point. They may have to beat Toronto to get in, and that would be an absolutely massive game between longtime Original Six Canadian rivals. And then what's Columbus doing? While Montreal plays Toronto, Columbus plays the worst team in the league, the Ottawa Senators. This is why I think that Columbus has the advantage as far as getting into the playoffs over Montreal, because they have the much easier schedule, and they end the season with two games that they absolutely should win against the Rangers and Senators, against lowly opponents. So Columbus, if they don't lock it in against the Rangers, they absolutely should lock it in against Ottawa. So that's what I could fit on the board, but we got other games that night as well that I think qualify as games of the week. We have the New York Islanders versus Washington. Depending on how the week up to that point goes, that could potentially be a game for the Metropolitan Division win, the first seed in the Metro. New York's playing good hockey again. There was a stretch there where the Islanders didn't look great, but they're playing good hockey again. Washington still has a pretty good, a decent lead in the division, but if Washington loses along, some games here early in the week, then the Islanders absolutely could catch up. So that could be a really, really important game. If not, it certainly could be just a fun game to watch between two very good teams that are looking like they're going to finish 1-2 in the Metro Division. Then we have Minnesota. See, I didn't put Minnesota, didn't make a point to put them down because I think at this point Minnesota will probably be eliminated already. But in case they're not, they play Dallas the last day of the season. Arizona, I think will probably be eliminated already. I think Colorado is going to take the last spot. But I think if anyone's going to take Colorado out of that last spot, I think the Coyotes have a better chance than the Wild. So in case Arizona is still in it at that point, they play Winnipeg. That's a very difficult game in a potential win and get in situation. And then what do the Avalanche do? Well, they have the San Jose Sharks, and that's certainly no walk in the park to end the year. However, I do think that by this point, by the last day in the season, I think Colorado is pretty much going to have wrapped up the last playoff spot, and they're going to get in as the second wild card team out west, just based on the schedule earlier in the week. I think maybe potentially Arizona could give them a run for that spot. I think Minnesota will be eliminated before the last day. But yeah, it's last week of the NHL season, and then it's playoff time, and this is what we've got. A lot of great playoff races going on in both conferences, and it's going to be an exciting last week of the season. But I am certainly ready for regular season hockey to be done. I want the playoffs. I am fully ready for playoff hockey. It is the greatest thing in all of sports, and I absolutely cannot wait. So with that, like, comment, share, subscribe, follow on social media. All those links are down in the description. If you'd like to further support the channel, the links to our Patreon and merchandise store are in the description as well. Keep spreading the word about this channel. Let's keep this thing growing. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll talk to you guys soon.